You got the dollar already? Okay. You just finishing them. Okay, the end of them. Did he give any introduction about the background of this mimer? Anyone remember? The mimer is a mimer that was said by the Rebbe Rashab, and the mimer is a mimer that basically talks about, of course, as you know, it talks about the clip of Midian, and it focuses on unity versus division. And he said the mimer in connection to something that had happened, where there was a big argument that broke out in the community. He said the mimer in connection to something that was going on in the community. And one of the leaders of the community had come to Lubavitch, to the Rebbe Rashab, and that's when he said this mimer. And the Frierdiker Rebbe writes in a letter explaining that even though the people who were involved in this dispute, they were all Hasidim, and they all meant well, and their intentions were each one for the benefit of the community, but nevertheless, it still resulted in arguing and fighting and a lot of heartache. And the point in this mimer was about how to, overcome all that. I just want to point out that one year, it was Tavshin Memches, 1988. It was totally unprepared. It was the Rebbe Rashab, who's the author of the mimer. It was his birthday, Chof Cheshvan. The Rebbe had gone to the Ohel. When he came back, he said that he wants to distribute this mimer to everybody. Let's hear. And this is what the Rebbe gave out. This is the original mimer in the Hebrew. And in fact, it was so unprepared that it wasn't even enough for everybody. So the Rebbe gave out whatever was available that night. And then he said that tomorrow during the night, they should reprint thousands of more copies, and every single person will get it. The only interesting thing is, you all know that after that year, after 1988, the Rebbe gave out Tanyas at one point. The Rebbe gave out the Maimer Atat Tetzaveh. There were a few things the Rebbe gave out, but he distributed it to everyone: men, women, children, even infants. This Maimer, which was the first time the Rebbe gave out the Maimer, he gave it only to boys who were bar mitzvah and girls who were bas mitzvah, not younger. The only exception was anyone from the age of 11, any girl from the age of 11, or any boy from the age of 12. It's not clear, first of all, why this minor was sort of limited, and also the age of 11 and 12. The only thing that comes to mind, even though we know there's much more to it, good morning, is that this pasuk, which the minor is based on, is a parsha that talks about vows, the laws that pertain to vows. That if a person makes a vow, they're obligated to fulfill their vow, and if they don't, then they violated one of the 613 commandments. In reference to vows, there's something there that's unique. We don't find this anywhere else in the Torah. And that is that the responsibility of keeping a vow is for girls from the age of 11 and boys from the age of 12. In other words, everything else in Torah, boys aren't responsible until their bar mitzvah, and girls aren't responsible until their bas mitzvah. And only in reference to vows, which is this parsha, we find that difference, that boys are responsible 1 year before bar mitzvah, and girls are 1 year before bas mitzvah. So some people like to connect it, and that's why when the Rebbe gave this out, he gave it out to even those that were a year before Bar Mitzvah, Bas Mitzvah. Okay, so we're going to start Dalit. So he's in the midst of explaining the clip of Midyan. Like we said when we were doing the other Maimarim, that there are different kind of, in the Torah we find different nations that attack the Yidden. Just like we had Purim, we were talking about Amalek. So on a physical level, you basically just see there were certain nations that hated the Jews, and therefore they attacked them. But according to Chassidus and according to Kabbalah, it's not just because they were bad people, but really there was a deeper and a higher spiritual background to it. And that is that these people embodied in them a certain spiritual klipa. Klipa is a force that Hashem created that opposes Kedusha. And therefore, these are the nations that oppose Kedusha. So there are different kinds of klipa. And therefore, each klipa has its unique character traits. Just like Begashmias, there are different, when a person is not well, it's because there's infection, there's bacteria, there are germs, but not all of them are the same. Certain germs cause this kind of results, other germs cause different kind of results. Same with klipa. And to say it in simple language means there are different kind of yetzaharas. People are some of them are passionate about money, and some people are passionate about power, and some people are passionate about food, and this is what leads them away from Torah. So Midyan is the passion for division. Let's start. So we're reading from the bottom, on the bottom part under the line where it has the English translation. So we're in the Mamar Heichaltzu and page 25, the Hebrew English. And this is why klipas minyan is connected to baseless hate, which basically means hate for no reason. The hate is not because of a certain detail, something specific, that the other person hurt me in a certain way, or the other person is opposing me, is against me, in a specific detail, he's hurting me or trying to prevent me from getting something that I need. If that were to be the case, that would be hate that's connected to specific attributes. Like we said before, if a person has a Yetzirah for power, and someone is threatening their position of power, so he hates them for that reason. So that's not called sinas chinam, that's not baseless hate. That means the hate is coming from my desire for power. The person has a desire for money, and that's the Yetzirah that's sort of driving them to do things, and even driving them to do things that are not permissible. And because he has such a drive for money, he'll work on Shabbos. Because he has a drive for money, he'll be dishonest. That's his Yetzirah. So if somebody is threatening his money in one way or another, someone's threatening his business, he'll hate them. But that's not sinas chinam. That means that's coming from that desire and that drive for money. So in the language of Chassidus is the person has chesed of klipa, and this other person is getting in the way of my chesed of klipa, and the other person is getting in the way of my gevura of klipa, and someone else is getting in the way of my tiferes of klipa. So if I hate that person, it's coming from that place in me that they're threatening. That's not midyan. That's connected to Shviras HaKelim Gvura. For example, Shuakas Vasina Al Menagda. In other words, the nature to be angry and to hate because someone is opposing me, that comes from the attribute of Gevura. Because the other person is getting in my way and the other person is opposing me. That's why he's fighting with him, arguing with him, and he's getting into this fight with the other person. So what is klipas migun? But the strife and contention and hatred that comes from klipas migun, something in me that's called midyan, that's driving me to hate this other person. You can't attribute that to a specific aspect of my nature, my characteristic, that is because of my desire for this or desire for that. But what is it? There's something in him that he just cannot tolerate the other person. Gam even someone that he doesn't actually know well. He had no dealings with him. Nevertheless, he finds it impossible to get together with him, to work together with him, and everything that comes up leads to an argument and division. This is what's called sinas chinam. He hates him chinam for no reason. Of course, this itself needs an explanation. So why does he hate him? If there's no reason. I'll soon explain. Page 27. The problem, there are times that he's saying sometimes it could be an interesting scenario where it's really sinas chinam, which means baseless hate, and yet there's a reason. Why isn't that a contradiction? So he says the hainu, this means sheyesh le'eza taina, he has some sort of a reason and explanation why he hates him, but the reason came later, which means it's not that these reasons are the actual cause for the hatred. On the contrary, the hatred is what came first, and then he needed something to justify himself, so his brain produced good reasons to give him the license to hate this person. But the reason is not the cause. That's not where it all began. Found a pretext, or some sort of false charge, to justify himself, to justify himself in front of other people. That's not the real reason. How do you know this? Sometimes you know this because you see that a person has something against another person for a reason. Then you find out, no, there was a mistake. That reason really doesn't hold, because what you thought he did, he really didn't do. Then he hates him anyway for another reason. And then you find out the other reason is not real. Then he hates him for a third reason. Basically, it means that the hate is something which has nothing to do with the reason. The reason is something which comes later just to justify the hate that the person has. So what is the hate from? Something about him that he can't tolerate other people. And the real siba, the real cause, is yeshus. And that's what midyan is all about. Yeshus that leads to hate. And what is yeshus? It's another word, yesh, from everything we learned, starting from Tanya, Maimarim, comes up all the time. And it's a very hard word to translate, because literally the word means yesh, it is. Everything is. What is not, everything is. But in Chassidus, yeshus means that the person's feeling or perception should be the way the truth is, that everything is really an extension of Hashem. And everything is a manifestation of Hashem. And nothing in the world really has its own independent entity because it doesn't have its own independent ability to exist without Hashem. So just the word yesh, which means it is, meaning to say it is independent of Hashem. And if it's independent of Hashem, that's already klipa. But it's part of being human, yeah.
What's the difference between the yeshus of Midyan and the yeshus of the other action?
Right, that's what I'm getting to. So yeshus in general is really, in another way of saying, that's just being human. Every human being feels that I am who I am. I have an identity. But when he's speaking about midyan, it means someone that it's an excessive sense of self-importance, an excessive sense of focusing on self and being self-centered to an excessive level. And that's what leads to the hate. That's the difference. Again, the one that you're talking about is like it's part of being human, natural. That's what the Nefesh Bahamas is. It's interesting that in Chassidus, we do use the word, but in general, when we talk about where the other drives come from, we say the Nefesh Bahamas. When you look in Tanya, when he describes the Nefesh Bahamas, really the Nefesh Bahamas is not like, when you say the word Yetzer Hara, you're saying there's a desire for something bad. Nefesh Bahamas means an animalistic soul. Animals aren't bad. Animals aren't evil. But an animal doesn't know anything else except for itself. It's not aware of a higher presence, of a higher purpose, something more meaningful in life. An animal, everything it does is for self-gratification. It eats food and has fun and plays with other animals. Everything is all about what could it do for itself and what could it do to protect itself, what could it do to feel good. So the animal soul, just the fact that I'm aware of self and I'm concerned about self as something separate from Hashem, that's yeshus. But that's the normal yeshus. That is by definition means being human. But when it's at a point where it's excessive, that's when it starts leading to trouble. And midyan is an excessive kind of yeshus, and shulchoshu bein atzmei feels very important in his own eyes. So he says in the next line, he feels himself. In other words, he's self-aware, not self-aware the way we use it in a positive way. But it means he's consciously conscious, everything he does, b'chol prat to prat shlei, in every detail. What that would mean is simple, that if you do something, what registers in my mind? Let's say someone walks over and says, I'm very hungry. Could you buy me a sandwich, as you'll experience here on Kingston Avenue, and you'll get that. And you walk over, you buy them a sandwich. What registers in my head? There's two people. One person, what registers in their head, Baruch Hashem, had this chus to make somebody happy, to make somebody, take away somebody's hunger. Or what registered in my head was, I just did an amazing thing. I'm amazing. That's the yeshus. That rather than thinking about what was done, it's thinking about what it does for me, how this inflates my ego, how this raises my bar, this makes me more important. I have some sort of a higher status because I did this, that, or the other thing. So if a person studies Torah and he finished, let's say, an entire tractate, and it took him a long time till he finished it, and he did it with all the Rashi and Tesus and commentary, which is amazing. And he's very happy, very excited. But what is he excited about? So the ordinary person is excited because he finished something in Torah, and he feels like he accomplished something which gives him tremendous pleasure. But the yeshus person will focus more on, I'm someone who knows this, and I have this knowledge, and I have this status. I'm somebody who I finished something complete, and I know it well. It's all about what it does for me. That's what it means. Margish esatzmei. He feels, they write, self-concern, feeling of self dominates every particular aspect of his life. Everything he does, it's all about, so what does it do for me? And because he's so obsessed with self and so obsessed with his own personal inflating himself. That's what doesn't let him tolerate the other person. Why? Page 228, page 228. Because of his yeshus, he doesn't leave room for another person. The hazulas, the other person, anyone else around, just by the fact that they're there, and especially if they occupy a certain importance, that by definition takes away from my importance, or at least from the potential of me spreading my importance. I mean, if you think of things in a very physical way, so let's say furniture that occupies space. If you have X amount of tables in this room, you can't put any more tables in, which means every table, every piece of furniture that you put down in this room occupies a certain amount of space. And it's basically two things. Number one, it occupies space. And number two, now that I've occupied this space, something else can be in this space that I'm occupying, obviously. So the more space I occupy, the less space I leave for others. The more space there are other things in the room, there's less space for me. So just like it is in the physical sense, that's the way it is also with the word space, figuratively speaking. That if I occupies a certain space, which means a certain importance in my own eyes, anyone else that is around, and especially if they have a certain importance, automatically it leaves less space for me. It takes away the spotlight from me. I have to share the spotlight with another person. So it makes me smaller. And that's a yesh. A person who's not concerned about their yeshus, that's not what they're obsessed with. It doesn't bother them so much. I'm doing something good, he's doing something good. But imagine, you did something, you feel very proud of what you did, and then when it comes to giving credit, they give you credit and another person credit. Some people wouldn't bother. Some people would be very upset. I did much more than them, or they didn't do anything, or they'll find all sorts of reasons what they did was really a waste, and what I did was really important. Why? Because getting all that credit gives me a sense of importance. And the fact that I have to share that credit, instead of having 100% importance, now I have 50%. Imagine the chas v'shalom give credit to 3 people. Now I have a third of that importance, and so on and so forth. What? This is one of the big problems in life. Yeah. Nimtza, what comes out of this is the ikar asiba who yeshu shaloi. That what's really the reason why I can't tolerate this person. I mean, we find this more, I would say, more pronounced when you're dealing with someone who does have a specific title, the Gemara says, the quote from Gemara, Kol uman seine bnei umnase, which means every craftsman or every skilled person doesn't like someone else who has the same skill, which means that if I have a certain name in the community that I'm good at something or other, and a new person moves into the community and he also is very good in that area, I'm going to find all sorts of faults. You have an artist, and then I see someone else comes around and does some art. Somehow or other, they'll always criticize the other person's work. If someone did work for you, even sometimes you find this with doctors, you find this with lawyers, you find this, and I don't mean anything, you come to a doctor and you said, I went to this other doctor, he told me this and this. Right away, you didn't know what he's talking about, he made a mistake. I mean, you see presidents, the president who becomes the new president has everything to say about the previous president and how good he was, he made a mistake. I'm not talking about our president right now, Trump, who's really amazing at it. But every one of them is the same. There was the predecessor was no good, he didn't know what he was doing, he messed things up, and I'm doing it right, and I know how to do it better, and so on and so forth. So specifically, when it's something like that, we find that it's just, of course they'll find fault what the previous doctor said, they'll find fault what the previous contractor did, what the previous lawyer suggested. It's always like whatever the other person said was no good. Why? And they have a reason. But the real truth is it comes from the fact that anybody who is exceptional in a certain area can't stand someone else is exceptional. What do you mean they can't stand them? Because it takes away from me and from my ego, so to speak. And this opposition that we're describing now, that means he's not really against something specific. What really is it? The fact, what's threatening him, just the mere fact that he exists. The mere fact that the other person is there, by definition, he's already making him less. So if he asks, why you hate this person? What is he doing to you? And he can't really point out anything that he's doing. The mere fact that he exists is already a threat to me. That means he's not leaving room for me to spread out. This is a famous story with the Tzemach Tzedek. There's actually something sort of heavenly with that story. This story with the Tzemach Tzedek is a short story, but there's a story behind the story. And that is that at the Rebbe's wedding, so the previous Rebbe at that time lived in one place, and the wedding was in Warsaw. So before the Shabbos, before the wedding, they made a kiddush, and the previous Rebbe said a mimer, and then they went to Warsaw for the actual wedding itself. When I came to the wedding, he said a mimer, which was sort of a repeat of the one that he said Shabbos, which is not so common. But he said a mimer, which is a repeat. And later he said that my father, at that time, his father, the previous Rebbe's father, was no longer here physically. And he said, my father told me that I should repeat this mimer and add this story with the Tzemach Tzedek. So the mimer is almost identical, and the only difference is the story was inserted into the mimer. And what is the story? The story is that there was a chassid who was actually a prominent chassid, a chassid who was very knowledgeable, a chassid who was someone who really worked on himself in terms of self-refinement. And he was an older chassid, so he was by the Tzemach Tzedek, third Rebbe of Chabad, and he complained about the way people relate to him in shul. And he said the people, they don't respect him. They step all over me. That was his complaint. So the Tzemach Tzedek said, who tells you to spread yourself out all over the place? That wherever they're stepping all over you. It's all in figurative language. But basically what it means is, if you spread yourself out all over, so wherever anybody walks, they're stepping on me. They're threatening me. I'm just saying, theoretically, imagine, I want to have an opinion who's going to be the chazan. I want to have an opinion who's going to read the Torah. I want to have an opinion who's going to be called up to the Torah. I want to have an opinion about everything that's going on. So if anyone else has an opinion, it's already opposing me and getting in my way. Who tells you to spread yourself out? Who says you have to be in charge of everything? Who says that you have to be on top of everything? That if someone else also has something to say, it's already getting in your way. So this is a person that the mere existence of the other person is already opposing him. And that's why he can't stand him. That's midya. The sit of the Kedusha, however, in Kedusha, ikrahu bittul. The main emphasis in Kedusha is bittul. Now we know bittul doesn't mean nullify yourself, but bittul means to feel connected to Hashem. We're not talking about bittul to undo your existence, but it means that separateness, that independence of Hashem. That's what I want to get rid of. So when a person with bittul, that kind of person could unite, and he's able to include himself with other people. Why? Because he has this bittul, which means when he does something or when he's involved in something, he's not focused on himself. the thing that registers in his brain is not about, so what does it mean about me, about my greatness, or about my name, about my status. He's thinking about whatever it is that needs to be done. So, he leaves room for other people as well. And when we say that he leaves room, this means he's able to accept the other person, is able to be united with the other person. He doesn't feel that the other person is getting in my way. It's like when you have two people have a disagreement. There are two types of disagreements, or sometimes even a normal disagreement could turn out to be a different kind of disagreement. There are many letters from the Rebbe. The Rebbe is advising people that are involved in some sort of a disagreement, whether it's husband and wife, whether it's a employer and employee, or whether it's some other kind of situation. Well, the Rebbe says, explain this point or that point, and then he writes, and beware, be very careful, this shouldn't turn into a power struggle. What's the definition of a power struggle? We all use that word in English. Power struggle means it's no longer relevant what's right and what's wrong. All that's important now is who's going to win. And sometimes people are even conscious that what they're fighting for is wrong, but they still keep fighting because they can't lose, they can't be defeated. I can't come out to be a loser. So I'm going to fight for what I said initially. And therefore, no matter what you explain and how you explain, no matter how good you explain that what you're doing is the right thing, they'll still be fighting it because they have to have it their way. It's either my way or highway. That's called a power struggle. A power struggle in the language of Chassidus is yeshus. That has to be, it's all about me. But someone who's bittul is not focused on me. It's focused on what it is that needs to be done. So I'm doing something, someone else can help me, great. More people can help me, it's even better. It'll be easier, we'll be able to accomplish more, and that's the difference. Nimtzu, so the end result of all this is the Sitra Achra, and the side of Klipa, it's either Yeshus. Klipa in general is Yeshus. That's the definition of Klipa. Klipa means a force that Hashem created that exists in a way that it perceives itself as separate from Hashem. So Mitzvah Yeshus, this is sort of the summary, the conclusion. And the other person opposes him just by the mere fact that they exist. And that's the real reason for the divisiveness and they're not being able to tolerate the other person. That's Klipa. Page 30, the Sita de Gedusha, but on the side of Gedusha, the Noisim Mokem al Azulas. Inside of Gedusha, he gives room for the other person, which means Shemakabala say he's ready to accept the other person. The Mesachadi may not only accept, but work together with them and be in harmony with the other person. I'll do this, you'll do that, we'll work together. That ability to work together comes from Bittul. What he writes in the summary is that sinas chinam, the real driving force for this basis hate is yeshus, which means there's really no real reason. But hapratim v'taimim, the details and the reasons, they come later, which means they're only there to sort of to rationalize and to justify what it is that I want, make it sound good. But in essence, that's not where it's coming from. Yeah.
I think it's very hard to get rid of it because a person rationalizes and I've already talked myself into it, so it's not like there's anything wrong with it. So how do you get to that person? And I know this is not, I know this is everyone, it's not just those people. I know it's what I mean. I'm sorry. So is it jealousy? Is that part of it?
By the way, jealousy is pretty much the same idea. I mean, I guess there's different kinds of levels and degrees in jealousy also. I always give this example that if you walk into a room where there are 10 children and you give out 10 bars of chocolate, then you check your pocket and you find, oh, I have an extra bar of chocolate. So you give it to the kid standing next to you. What's going to happen next? That's not fair. He got 2. Okay, that's understood. But there are 2 ways of calming everybody down. One way is to find another 9 bars of chocolate. The other way, take it away from this child and everybody's going to be calm. Why? You wanted a second bar. Has it helped you that I took it away from this boy? And the answer is because it's not just that I want a second bar, it's because they have 2, that's why I need 2. Oh, you only have 1, I'm fine with having 1. So that's what Yeshus is, that it's a power struggle and it's competition. That's what competitive. I mean, there's a competition we'll learn about in the Maimer. That's a very positive thing, competition. Right now we have in Kronheis the big Chidon competition going on. That's a positive thing that's there to motivate people to do more good. And there's a competition that leads to hate and sometimes even leads to murder because you're competing and the other person is ahead of you. That's, of course, that's all. That's what Yeshus is. And I'm obsessed with Yeshus. I cannot stand and I cannot tolerate that someone else is ahead of me and is higher than me. Your question is, how do I come to recognize that? So the person that you're having a disagreement with, they're not going to be able to convince you. That's for sure. So it has to be a third person. Plus, it has to be that I am a sincere person. I'm looking to know the emes. So I will turn to someone who is impartial, someone who is objective, and ask them, "What do you think about this? Am I in the right track or not?" Or that's the purpose of a mimer. We have a mimer. A person learns a mimer and takes it to heart and thinks to himself, "Is this me? Is this mimer speaking to me? Does this apply to me?" Of course, we know that many people could learn a mimer and say, the Rebbe once said by Fabringen that whenever he says something like sort of rebuke about things that Rebbe never mentioned names. He always talking about things happening. This is wrong or that wrong. He says, one thing I know for sure, I'm never embarrassing anybody. Because whoever hears me speak always knows that I'm talking about the other person. So you learn a mimer, and the mimer makes a lot of sense, and you say, well, that's my opponent, that guy. It's exactly what he's all about. That's not going to help either. True. There has to be something in me, readiness, and say to myself in a sincere way, you have to be ready for emes. And emes means whether I do like it or I don't like it, whether it validates me or doesn't validate me, I'm ready to hear what it says. Well, like one of the things that are found in Pirkei Avos, and we just learned about it in the Rambam, one of the things which are considered like a cornerstone, something really fundamental in a person being able to grow in terms of character traits, in terms of grow spiritually, the Rambam writes, there's something found in Pirkei Avos, which is to be ready to accept criticism. Something very rare in this generation, which means that very often, if somebody older, somebody who's a teacher, or somebody who's a guide, will point out to someone what they're doing is wrong, very often they just won't come to them again, they won't speak to them again. It's not what they want to hear. So what is it in a person that is resisting to hear that I did something wrong? We're human, humans can make mistakes, but there's a part of me, which is the yeshes, that doesn't want to recognize any kind of weakness, that I'm in some way weak or wrong, I have flaws. That's all part of yeshes. And again, everybody's yesh, but when a person has this to a point where it's excessive, that's when it starts getting in the way. You're doing things right. Okay, now, the next few chapters, which is Hey, Vav, and Zion, explains what he said before, but in much more deeper Hasidic terms and Kabbalistic terms. It's a lot of they're very deep. And no matter how much I tried, I don't think that, this is something where everybody's welcome to take this book with the English and try to work it through. But we're gonna skip it in class. We're gonna go to the next chapter, which goes back to the more practical part. And the practical part, that starts again in chapter 8. Yes. I do have a workbook that I made for this minor. I wasn't here, so I didn't prepare it. I'll try to prepare it. It's Hashem with questions and the Hasidic terms that come out of each chapter. But we're going to continue now from Ches and on. Okay. We continue.
Oh. Probably, right? It's not water.